Welcome to the first lecture of the course. The topic name is Introduction and Purpose of Amazon Cognito. So according to Rahul Abati and David Cathy has been explained about the Amazon Cognito and what are the process and the purpose of the specified application process and security level. So Amazon Cognito is an Amazon Web Services product that controls user authentication and access for mobile application on internet connected devices. We know that we have explained on the introduction session, as well as the services saves and synchronize end user data, which enables an application developer to focus on writing code instead of building and managing the backend infrastructure. So this can accelerate the mobile application development process. And we need to understand about the access control via authentication and authorization requires confirming two things. Number one is the identity of the person trying to access the device or website, and if they are actually allowed to do so, and both aspects are critical in ensuring the organizations can keep their networks and protected resources secure from bad actors. And here's where Amazon Cognito comes in. We need to understand, because Amazon Cognito collects the user profiles attributes into directories called user pools that a mobile app or web app uses to configure limited access to AWS resources. And an identity pool consolidates and end user information which client access platforms, devices, and operating systems receive to organize federated identity groups. And another one is a data synchronizes with AWS when a device is online, and allowing an end users to access the data can also be saved locally to a SQLite database and while offline before reconnecting. And Amazon Cognito associates data sets with identities and saves encrypted information as a key or value pairs Cognito synchronized store. So each user can save a maximum of 20 MB of data, with each individual data set containing up to 1 MB. And we know that your developer can configure Amazon Cognito to accept the streams of events as data is updated and synchronized. So a mobile developer can also query data through other AWS cloud services, such as we can say some example like Amazon Redshift database, regional database services, the shortcode is RDS, and instance or an Amazon simple storage devices or services S3 file. So what is Amazon Cognito used for? Amazon Cognito enables a simple and secure user authentication and authorization and user management for web and mobile applications. And with the Cognito, user or visitor can sign in with a username and a password through Amazon or through a third party like Facebook, Google, or Apple. So that's with Cognito, a developer can easily add user sign up, sign in, and access control to their application with its built-in user interface, UI, and easy configuration process we can do. And second one is a developer can identify that federate identities from social identity providers like a Facebook, Twitter, and some other social platforms we can say, and synchronizes data across multiple devices and applications, and provides secure access to other AWS services from their applications by defining roles and mapping users to different roles. So since Cognito handles all authentication requirements and developers can focus on creating application and websites, this can accelerate the development process and shorten the release date and type of cycles and speed up time to market and time to value. So Cognito is a part of the Amazon Web Services ecosystems, and the Cognito console itself is a part of an organization's AWS management console, where they can see all type of information about their Cognito account and building process. So users pools versus identity pools, we need to understanding the differences both process, and we will discuss the very in-depth mode on the later presentation, and the separate presentation lecture type will be available on the third and fourth lecture. So the two main components of Amazon Cognito are user pools, because user directories that provide sign up and sign in options for application users, and identity pools means the Cognito elements grant users access to other AWS services, example Amazon S3 and DynamoDB. So with the user pool, users can sign in an application through Amazon Cognito, social identity providers, example Google or Facebook, or through security assertion network language like SAML identity providers. And each users will have a directory profile. A developer can access these profiles through a software development kit, we can say that SDK, And user ports can check for compromised credentials and provide email and phone-based verification and offer multi-factor authentication. We can say that MFA for additional security level. And we need to understand about an admin can also integrate AWS Lambda with Amazon Cognito Identity to add logic for customizable security features. And if an organization needs to provide users with access to AWS resources, as well as they can configure an identity pool, and identity pools are federated identities that support authentication through user pools and federatory identity providers. And SAML identity provides and even unauthenticated identities like guest users with identity pools, and organizations can create unique identities and assign user permissions. So the identity pools and user pools can be used separately or together. So both we can do the same process. So what about the SDK support? A mobile developer and application developer can use the SDK to integrate with Cognito or directly access server-side APIs. And AWS supports like SDK, Software Development Kit, and Amazon Cognito in its AWS Mobile SDK, which includes libraries and codes and APIs to help developers use the service. And the SDK is available for iOS and Android, Unity and Kindle Fire. And the AWS SDK for JavaScript also supports Cognito. And user ports are available in the AWS SDK for JavaScript and the AWS Mobile SDK for iOS and Android mode. So how Amazon Cognito authentication works, the first process we need to understand the level, and here is how authentication works and when identity pools and user ports are used together. So user signs and through your user portal, and second one is once successfully authenticated, they receive a user pool token, and third process will be on the application exchanges the token for AWS credentials through an identity pool, and fourth one is they can use these authenticated AWS credentials to access other services in the AWS cloud. This is the overview of how Amazon Cognito security works, and this is the sample image. What are the process has been completed from the starting level to end of the process. And synchronizing user data with AWS Cognito Sync mode. So the shortcode of AWS Cognito Sync synchronizes user profile data across mobile devices and web applications. So the feature allows user to obtain a normalized user ID and credentials with Amazon Cognito. The service supports both Android and iOS devices with high-level client libraries that catch users' data locally. The latter makes data available even if a device itself is offline, and user data is persisted in a data set, and this data is accessible only to the credential assigned to your particular identity. The private user identities Cognito Sync requires an Amazon Cognito identity pool, and therefore to use Amazon Cognito Sync, an organization needs to first set up an identity pool. So Amazon Cognito security and data protection we need to understand, because security in Amazon Cognito aligns with the AWS. It means a shared security model for data protection. So the AWS provides security of the cloud, and while organizations are responsible for security in the cloud mode for an additional layer of security, and Amazon Cognito supports MFA and encrypts data at rest and in transit per industry. It's also compliant with the numerous data protection standards and regulations, including the HIPAA and PCI DSS and Service Organization Control, and ISO or IEC 27001/27017 or 27018, and ISO 9001. And Amazon Cognito also support a number of identity and access management applications and capabilities like IAM, including the identity-based policies and policy actions, temporary credentials, and service roles and service-linked roles. So what about the IAM or service components has been merged with the process, because authentication of services based on the single sign-on and multi-factor authentication and session and token management, and authorization services, and it will be based on the roles and the rules and attributes. Example, we can say the metadata and the privileged access. And according to the user management services has been connected and merged with the provisioning level and deprovisioning, self-service, and delegation. So As well as we need to understand about the directory services has been connected with the identity store, and that store level will be connected with the directory federation, metadata synchronization, and virtual direct. This is a model of IAM service components, and it has been started with the governance framework and the reporting and analysis process. So this is Amazon Cognito includes a number of identity access and management capabilities, which I have explained here. So what about the Amazon Cognito pricing? And the monthly active users determine pricing for Amazon Cognito. A user is an MAU if there is a sign up and sign in token refers or password change preparation related to that user within a calendar month. So the first 15,000 monthly active users are totally free, and thereafter the pricing is based on a tiered model based on the number of MAUs. And the charges for Cognito Sync are based on the number of synchronizations and operations and the amount of data in the Cognito Sync store. You can just check it out, the AWS website services. And an enterprise can store 10 GB of data and perform minimum the 10 lakh synchronization operations in the month and for up to 12 months process. So once exhausted, Amazon Cognito charges 15 cents per GB of sync storage per month and 50 cents for every 10,000 sync operations. So this is a major process, as well as Amazon Cognito enables you to synchronize data across the user's devices to their application experience remains consistent when they switch between a device or upgrade to your new devices. And your applications can save data locally on users' devices, allowing your applications to work even when the devices are offline, and then automatically synchronize the data when the device is back offline and online. So with Amazon Cognito, you can focus on creating great application experiences instead of worrying about building, securing, and scaling a solution to handle user management, authentication, and sync across platforms and services. And Amazon Cognito is designed for developers who want to add user management and sync functionality to their mobile and web applications. So developers can use Cognito Identity to add sign up and sign in to their applications and to enable their users to securely access their application resources. So this Amazon Cognito also enables developers to sync data across devices, platforms, and applications. So okay, my dear students, I hope you have enjoyed the first session. Thank you once again, and thank you all. Good morning, my dear students. Good morning, one and all. Welcome to the second lecture of the course. The topic name is Features of AWS Cognito and Cognito User Pool and Identity Pool. So what about the key factors of Amazon Cognito? Authentication is an extra layer of protection for applications where users can authenticate through. The number one is username and password, OTP based authentication, and multi-factor authentication. So authorization is when a user wants to access private resources like a database or REST API, and for which they need the authorization to access the secure resources. And the user pool is like an activity directory of the users to sign in or sign up for the applications, and the identity pool is to grant access to the AWS resources. The user pool is directory that stores a user's login credentials, which can be used for further login validations. And Amazon Cognito provides temporary login credentials with limited access to AWS resources. And when the device is online, the data is automatically synced with AWS, and it allows the users to access the data from multiple devices. To activate Amazon Cognito Sync, organization must set up an identity pool. In Amazon Cognito, we can use the Lambda function to migrate complete users into the user pool from different directory services without resetting their passwords. So this is the process of how the AWS Cognito authentication works. It's starting from the application and connected with the user pool and the identity pool, and other AWS services you can connect with your applications through your mobile or your desktop. What are the authentication tokens you will get from the user pool to the application, and what are the access AWS services and the credentials you can get from the other AWS services from the app? So this is a major diagram. And first the user sign in to the user pool, and once the authentication is successful, the user receives the user pool token, and with the help of the identity pool and the application changes token for AWS credentials. Now the user can use these AWS credentials to access the AWS resources. So for successful sign in a web application, a valid username and password combination normally is required, and more ways to ensure user authentication are included in modern authentication flows. This is no exception while using AWS, so thanks to AWS Cognito's capabilities and functionalities. So the Amazon Cognito Services is intended to provide APIs and infrastructure for key user management features such as authentication, authorization, and managing user repositories with various operations from your web and mobile applications. So it has two main components, a user pool and identity pool. And user pool provides a sign up and sign in options for your application users. They act as user directories, and identity pools provide access to other AWS services like AWS S3 and AWS DynamoDB. So you can either use these components separately or together. In this lecture, I can just go through about the concentrating on user pool, and Amazon Cognito makes it so simple to add user sign up and sign in and access control to your web and mobile applications. So actually we have explained that it provides a complete solution for your user authentication, and its main features are the storage of usernames and passwords, the management of sessions, and the provision of forgotten passwords functionality. So all you have to do is connect it to its endpoints, and that's pretty awesome, right? And let's say an application requires a secure user login. Instead of coding at your user interface page and integrating backend services to it, and why not use the well-known services from a large company like AWS to manage our users and their credentials? So what about the features of AWS Cognito? The secure passwords, number one, and AWS relieves you and the developer of the responsibility of ensuring that your database is properly protected and the passwords are securely stored. In fact, you don't even have access to the passwords of the users. This is excellent in terms of security. And Cognito also stores passwords that comply with major compliance standards such as HIPAA. With this protected health information can be stored in Amazon Cognito. And authorization and SAML and more. Amazon Cognito not only securely stores your data but also provides all of the functionality required for an authorization integration. There is no need to write a custom code to manage your user sessions and Cognito authentication tokens. And the Amazon Cognito APIs allows you to simply issue calls to Cognito to validate or obtain new tokens. And it also handles password reset request, account validation, and pretty much any other user maintenance operation you can think of. It also allows you to validate not only emails but also phone numbers using AWS SNS. And aside from authorization, and you can also integrate with other identity providers, and Cognito also you to easily add additional sign-in platforms and options for your users from Facebook to Google and even SAML. And customizing all of this integration takes time, and Cognito provides you with a consistent experience to present to your users. So to get better understanding on both of the terminologies, you can just we will suggest you to go through the Amazon Website Services. And what about the simple integration process? Well, the combination of Amazon Cognito and AWS API Gateway is a common use case. You're just setting up your API to validate against the Cognito pool takes no time at all. This validation occurs even before your API forwards the call to the next function, which helps to reduce the cost of having to validate sessions. This makes securing your endpoints a piece of cake. So what are the quick startup? When you consider all of the features listed above, you will realize that you can quickly and easily set up authentication in your application. So simply configure your Cognito pool and connect to the APIs and you are ready to go. This is extremely useful when prototyping and the application are focusing on providing functionality in your application. And it helps you in choosing to focus on what's important, the features that it will provide a unique value. And Cognito hosted user interface is another feature. You simply enable the feature and a page for your users to log in becomes available. And you now have a page that conforms to the most recent authorization standards with minimal effort. And this the disadvantage of this approach is that the customizability and styling options for the page are rather limited. So what about the Cognito user pool? In Amazon Cognito, user pool is similar to a user directory. Your users can sign into your web or mobile app using it. Users can also sign in via social identity providers such as Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, and SAML identity providers. So this is a sample model. And user pool provides the following services. Number one is sign in and sign up services, customizable web user interface to sign up users that is built in, and source sign in with Facebook, Google, Amazon and Apple, as well as sign in with SAML identity provides from your user pool, and user directory and user profile management, and multi-factor authentication we can get because it checks for compromised credentials, and account takeover protection and phone and email verification, or all security features are available here. User migration and customized workflows and through AWS Lambda triggers. So Amazon Cognito generates JSON web tokens and JWT, and after successfully authenticating a user, which you can use to secure and authorize access to your own APIs or exchange for AWS credentials. So token handling is provided by Amazon Cognito via the Amazon Cognito pools and user identity SDKs for JavaScript, Android and iOS. So user pools and identity pools are the two main components of Amazon Cognito, and identity pools provide AWS credentials to your users and provide other AWS services. So you can just configure an identity pool to exchange your pool tokens for AWS credentials to allow users in your user pool to access AWS resources. So AWS Cognito hands-on, the step one is assigning to the Amazon Cognito console by giving correct credentials. And the second step, after searching for the Cognito service in the dashboard, select manage user pools. And step 3, select create a user pool. And step 4, choose a name for your user pool and click on the review defaults button. And step 5, on the review page and click on create pool. And then a message will appear confirming the user pool is created. And later, if you want to view the user pool that you created, you can just navigate to manage user pool in the Cognito services. So we need to understand about what are the pricing of. Already we have discussed in the lecture 1, and the pricing of Amazon AWS Cognito follows that pay as you go concept, just like many other AWS services, and no minimum charges are levied. And if you use Amazon Cognito Identity to create user pool, and you only pay for monthly active users, and a user is considered an MAU if you are an identity operation involving the user occurs within a calendar month, and such as sign up, sign in, token transfers or password change. You are not charged for additional sessions or inactive users during that calendar month. So the Amazon Cognito service is useful when an application developer doesn't have the time or resources to invest in building a login page, user interface and maintain user credentials in a database. It also provides several features such as multi-factor authentication, OTPs, prompts, fingerprints or security questions. Phone numbers can be validated too. So you are provided with an SDK like Amazon Cognito SDK, where with only a few lines of code, and you can just get set up your working user login page for your application. And if your application already has a solution for user authentication, you can also migrate to Amazon Cognito with only a few steps. So you can also prompt the user to sign up through Google, Facebook, Amazon and other identity providers also. So with all these benefits, the cost of the first 50,000 monthly active users and is totally free, and it can be scaled itself as the user pool expands for a minimal amount per user after the free trial limit. So this Amazon Web Services is very ideal for app developers with budget constraints and if they want their application to get going as soon as possible. Okay, my dear students, I hope you have enjoyed the second session. Thank you once again, and thank you all. Good morning, my dear students. Good morning, one and all. Welcome to the third lecture of the topic. The topic name is User Authentication and Authorization with AWS Cognito. So Amazon Cognito authentication process will be major in one, and using Amazon Cognito, you can configure multiple IDPs and identify providers as well as SAML like security assertion markup language for multiple domains. And Amazon Cognito serves as a gateway between the PVWL like password vault web access and the different IDPs like identity provider by routing the authentication request to the specific IDP based on the user domain. Actually, this lecture is aimed at people familiar with Amazon Cognito, and if you are new to Amazon Cognito and would like to learn more, you just go to the Amazon Cognito website and find out the information more. And the following section include the procedures required for configuring the Amazon Cognito authentication model in method in PVWA like password, World Web Access mode. So before you configure Amazon Cognito in PVWA, you must first configure it in AWS method. So configure Amazon Cognito in AWS method. So before you begin, make sure that you are registered to the Amazon Cognito services in AWS. So create a user pool in Amazon Cognito. In AWS, in the Cognito console, you just create a new user pool. When prompted to select the creation method, click setup and step through the settings process, like open the attributes tab and clear all attributes. And after the user pool is created, you will not be able to change attributes values. So open the review tab and click create pool, and open the identity providers tab and then click SAML and define the IDPs for each tenant and enter the following information for each IDP, like metadata document means define the tenant's SAML document endpoint or metadata XML, and the provider name will be enter the provider name, and identifiers enter the user's email in domain in lowercase. You must enter at least one identifier, like for example your website.com, or will allow authentication for user at your website.com and user at your, but not user at your subdomain. Okay, you just use your original website ID, and enable IDP and sign up flow like optional mode, and select the checkbox if you want to enforce a single sign off. It must also be enabled in the IDP. So third step will be open the app clients tab and create an app client. So a unique app client ID is generator, and use this ID when you configure the web.config file in the PVWA. So for details, you can just check it out, the configure the web.config file, and open the app client settings tab and enter the following information. Number one is enable identity providers. So select all the IDPs except for Cognito user pool, and call back URLs like the URL to the PVWA login page. The URL must be in the following format: http:// it means hypertext transfer protocol, and your website / your password word / b10/logon/cognito, like that. So the sign up URLs may be that URL to which the user is redirected when logging off from PVWA or IDP. For example, the login page, use this URL then when defining the Amazon Cognito authentication method in PVWA. For details, you can just check it out. What about the log of URL method? And allowed authorization flows means select implicit grant, and allowed authorization scopes means select email and open ID. So fifth step will be open the domain name tab and set the Amazon Cognito domains, and this domain name to be like a web.config file in PVWA, and as described in configure the web.config file. So retrieve the JWKS and that download and save the JSON and web key set like a JWKS for your user pool, and navigate to https://cognito-idp, and it's just starting the code on AWS region and .amazon aws.com and / your user pool ID / .well known and / jwks.json. And you can find the user pool ID in the general settings in the tab Amazon Cognito console, and the output sample will be here. This is a sample model. And what about the configure the IDPs? For each SAML or IDP, and enter the following information starting from the audience. So enter the Amazon Cognito URL in the following format. So URL like :amazon:/cognito.sp user pool ID. And you can find the user pool ID in the general settings tab in the Amazon Cognito console. Okay. So what about the ACS consumer URL mode? Like enter the assertion consumer endpoint to the SAML identity provider in the following format. So it will be on a http:// and your domain prefix and .authorization, and it just starting your tag at the AWS region and .amazoncognito.com /SAML2/ID or IDP response. So this is a format of your identity provided from SAML, and you can find the domain prefix and the region value for the user pool on the domain name tab of the Amazon Cognito console. So what about the ACS consumer URL validator? Enter a secure and regular expression based on the ACS consumer URL, and a single layout URL will be the major one, and enter the sign of the URL you entered in Amazon Cognito. You can just check it out, the sign of the URLs. So what about the email? Add a custom email parameter, so both field and value should be named email. Okay, so configure Amazon Cognito in PVW process and a password world web access. The Amazon Cognito authentication method can be added to PVWA manually after installation mode. You must configure Amazon Cognito in AWS before you can configure it in PVWA. So configure the web.configure file. So starting from the open the web.configure file for editing from the following location, and for example inetpub /www root /password vault, and second one is add the following keys under the app settings section, and Cognito URL, the Amazon Cognito domain name is the domain that you configured and create a user pool in Amazon Cognito. So you can just find the user pool domain name and the domain name tab in the Amazon Cognito console level will be here. Add key equal to double quotes of Cognito URL and value equal to double quotes user pool domain name and slash your tag closing. And the Cognito user pool ID will be on. You can find the user pool ID in the app client settings tab in the Amazon Cognito console, and the code will be on add key equal to double quotes Cognito user pool ID, and the value will be on user pool ID. And the Cognito client ID will be on. You can find the application client ID in the application client tab in the Amazon Cognito console. So that process will be on add key is equal to Cognito client ID and value equal to application client ID. So what about the Cognito JWK? The content of the JWK is .json file for you just saved and retrieve the JWKs. So add key is equal to Cognito-JWK and the value equal to single quotes of JWKs and close your tag. So add the Amazon Cognito authentication and authentication method in administration. Go to the configuration options and click options. And second one is on the option page is the left panel. So just right click on the authentication methods and then click add authorization method. So set the following properties and ID equal to Cognito, and enabled format will be on S, and log of URL, like the URL must be in the following format as we have explained earlier: http://domain/logout and !client underscore ID equal to application client ID, and a logout URL underscore ERI equal to open tag and a logout URL close tag. The logout URL is the name URL as the sign out URLs and field in the user pool application client settings page. When you configure the Amazon Cognito services, you just check it out the sign out URL process from the website. And fourth one is click apply. So this is your dashboard process, and add the IDPs to the access restriction section will be on in administration mode, and go to the configuration options and click options. And second step will be for each IDP on the options page in the left pane, right click access restriction and go to the add allowed referral. And third step will be the in base URL enter the IDP's domain, and fourth one is click apply. Okay, my dear students, I hope you have enjoyed the session of the 3, and thank you once again. Thank you all. Good morning, my dear students. Good morning, one and all. Welcome to the 4th lecture of the topic. The topic name is Amazon Cognito Identity. So AWS Cognito provides an authentication service for applications, and it is a serverless, and you don't need to manage any database or servers to handle user data and authentication flows. So Cognito can be leveraged to handle those tasks, as well as imagine a web application needs to access AWS resources using AWS SDK with authenticated users. So this lecture I can explain about the how to provide a walkthrough on how to achieve that, as well as we need to explain about the Amazon Cognito identity process. So a straightforward and a simple way of doing this would be to include a secret key of AWS user to enable access to AWS resources. But this is less secure, and it's not possible to restrict access to certain users. So that's where user authentications comes into play, either with AWS Cognito or with external authentication providers. To allow AWS resources and access to users with authentication providers in Cognito, identity pools are used. And identity pools can provide AWS access via multiple external authentication providers such as Facebook, Amazon, Google, or OpenID Connect providers and SAML identity providers. This is called federated authentication. And in order to successfully authenticate a user, AWS Cognito needs an identity pool and a token received from an external authentication provider or from AWS Cognito authentication provider itself. So AWS Cognito provides the ability for us to configure our own identity like authentication provider,
and which means the control of the user sign up, sign in, password management, and many more user management features are in our hands. So Amazon Cognito Identity SDK for JavaScript. You can now use Amazon Cognito to easily add user, sign up and sign in to your mobile and web applications. And your user pool in Amazon Cognito is a fully managed user directory that can scale to hundreds of millions of users. So you don't have to worry about building, securing, and scaling a solution to handle user management and authentication. So what about the introduction part? The Amazon Cognito Identity SDK for JavaScript allows and JavaScript enabled applications to sign up users and authenticate users, view, delete, and update user attributes within the Amazon Cognito Identity service. And other functionality includes password changes for authenticated users and initiating and completing further password flow for unauthenticated users. And your users will benefit from a number of security features, including SMS-based multi-factor authentication and account verifications via phone or email. And the password features use the secure remote password protocol to avoid sending clear text passwords over the wire. So how to set up? There are two ways to install the Amazon Cognito Identity SDK for JavaScript and its dependencies. So depending on your project setup and experience with modern JavaScript build tools, so download the bundle file from npm and some of the company included in your HTML, or install the dependencies with user bundler like Webpack. And this is a sample code, and install using separate JavaScript file also available here. And the Amazon Cognito offers two user pool SDKs. The number one is the Amazon Cognito Identity SDK. It is a core user pools library that enables to interact with your user management and authentication functions in the Amazon Cognito User Pools API. And the Cognito JS authentication of SDK, like the wrapper around the Identity SDK that web pages to your application for the following, like sign up, sign in, confirmation, multi-factor authentication, and sign out. So what about the prerequisites we need? The number one is to create a user pool ID and an application client ID. The Amazon Cognito Identity SDK for JavaScript requires two configuration values from your AWS account in order to access your Cognito user pool. That maybe the user pool ID example, some of the code, for example, I have given here, and the user pool applicant called client ID, like example this one. So what about the creates a Cognito identity pool? And if you want to work with other AWS services, you must first create an Amazon Cognito identity pool. After you create this identity pool, you can get AWS credentials by passing the identity pool ID and the ID token, which were obtained earlier when signing in the user. The following example shows how to populate identity pool ID and push, and how to pass the ID token through the logins map. So this is a sample code, and second one is object creation, user pool object. This is the sample code of user pool object, and user object will be on your just to create a user object with the user pool code like this one. And what about the operation mode? What about the sign up process? The sample code of sign up process, and user confirmation. You just understand about the validation. And user validation can happen by the user entering the codes and either through SMS or email based on the user pool settings. And a pre-sign up AWS Lambda function to automatically confirm users. Example where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the validation code, means the code here. And recent a confirmation code. So you just how to use your user object. This is a sample code. And email verification email may end up in your spam folder sometimes. So for real deployments, configure the user pool to use the Amazon simple email service to send emails from a domain you own. And sign in process and Cognito sign in within the identity library. So the prerequisite means the user must be confirmed to obtain a session, and a user object has been created. And if sign in process, if you do it is successful, the on success callback is called, and fails, the on failure callback is called, and requires MFA, the MFA required callback is called, and you must invoke send MFA code on the Cognito user object, as well as the verification code that is received must be passed when the user is that sign in process. So code will be creating the authorization process, properties code will be like. So sign the user in with the user object code has been given here. And attribute mode means so retrieving user attributes. So retrieve the current user from local storage from a user pool object after signing. So this is the code, and update attributes for an authenticated user. This is a sample code. And delete attributes meant for authenticated user. You just concentrate on this code. So verify an attribute for instance email process. So that process you need to understand the code. And what about the session mode of the code? So how to get the current user and the session and identity pool. So that process code has been mentioned here, and how to get a session for current user and reference credentials code I have given here. The password and how to changing the password process of the code. And forgotten password means if a forgotten password a code will be sent to the user uses this code together with a new password to complete this flow. So the relevant call is forgot password on a Cognito user object that is unauthenticated. The relevant callbacks are shown in the following examples. And how to disable MFA for our user pool, because disables multi-factor authentications for our user pool, and it has the optional MFA setting for an authenticated user. And how to enable your MFA, and enables multi-factor authentication for our user pool. This is the enable MFA code. How about the sign-up process? From the application creates the local user session, and the user must sign in again to establish a new session process. And sign-up process will be on sign-up from the application, sign-up globally. And if you want to delete the total users, means the deletes and authenticated users, this code will be on work. Okay, my dear students, I hope you have enjoyed the specific code session. Thank you once again. Thank you all. Good morning, my dear students. Good morning, one and all. Welcome to the final lecture of the course. The topic name is Integrate with Amazon Cognito. We know Amazon Cognito is a backend as a service that lets you focus on writing a fantastic user experience for your application, native or web, and you can read more and from the Amazon Cognito website for the Cognito services. And this lecture will explain how you can integrate your applications with two solutions. Author 0 to get authentications with either associate providers like Facebook, Twitter, and so on. And enterprise providers are regular username and password, and Amazon Cognito to get a backend for your applications without writing a line of code. You can just review available providers on your view connection pages, and how to configure the Amazon Web Services process. And so just to create a new OpenID Connect provider, the first step is to create an OpenID Connect like OIDC provider pointing to your authorization 0 account, and please take a note of your authorization 0 domain and your domain name and your application ID. These values can be found in your application settings. So these values will be used to create an identity pool in the IAM console. And in the IAM console, select the identity providers link in the left sidebar and select create provider, and choose the provider type and select OpenID Connect from the drop down from the provider URL. So enter your http:// in your account name .authorization0.com, and for audience enter your client ID and find your client ID from the specified dashboard, and use the thumb point and thumbprint to verify the server certificate of your IDP. So to learn how, just to check it out, obtaining the thumbprint for OpenID Connect identity provider from the website, and select add provider and navigate to your newly created provider to find the provider ARM, which will be used in a later step. And it's not necessary to set up an IAM role after creating the identity provider. If you don't have one already, a Cognito will create a default IAM role in the next step. So to obtain the author0 dashboard thumbprint value, retrieve your author0 domain certificate chain, and once you have obtained the certificate chain, and isolate the lost certificate in the chain, and this will be your certificate of your root certificate authority. And using this CS certificate, compute the fingerprint and convert the fingerprint to a thumbprint, all of the characters. So use the computer thumbprint when calling the AWS. So when create OpenID Connect iPhone provider command. So create a Cognito identity pool, and now you need to create identity pool in the Cognito console. This will be used to log into Amazon Cognito using the authorization 0 identity provider that you created in the previous step. So sign into the Cognito console. So select for writer identities to start creating a new identity pool. For identity pool name, and specify a name for the pool, example authorization 0, and under authentication providers, click the Open ID tab and select the name of the provider you created in the previous steps. So click create pool, and a confirmation page appears that allows access to your resources. So select allow to finish creating the new identity pool. Under dashboard, select edit identity pool to view the identity pool ID. Finally, use the ARN of the row that was automatically created in the previous step from the IAM console. This value be used when sending credentials to Cognito. So how to configure authorization 0? Amazon uses the public signing key from the OpenID provider metadata to validate the signature of the JSON web token like JWT. And by default, authorization 0 uses the RS-256 signature algorithm. And if you receive invalid login token errors, go to the authorization 0 dashboard to application and select applications and click the show advanced settings link and the 0 auth and change the algorithm is to RS-256. This is a sample model of advanced settings, and you can just check it out, the allowed APIs and the JSON web token signature here, and change the process HS256 and trust token endpoint IP and header just disabled, and YDC confirmed disabled, and the cross origin verification fallback also here mentioned here. So what about the implementation process? And you can just use authorization 0 log to log the user in, and you can just check it out the instruction on how to implement login from the Amazon Web Service website. And once the user is successfully logged in with authorization 0, the next step is to send their credentials to Amazon Cognito. So Cognito takes the ID token that you obtain from the OIDC identity provider and uses it to manufacture unique Cognito IDs for each person who uses your application. So when the user is logged into Cognito through authorization 0, you can just store the information in Cognito that only this will be able to access. For example, this is a sample code I have given here, starting from the let Cognito sync equal AWS Cognito default Cognito, and let a data set and main data set process, and database data set synchronize like any object, and dispatch underscore asynchronous process, and the void in model and return nil. So setting new value. So this is the sample code. You can just check it out from, for example, with the Swift to process. Okay, my dear students, I hope you have enjoyed the final session and the course. Thank you once again, and thank you all.